Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. And let me make sure I am up and that the world is good. Alright, so this one is going to have to be fast because Miss Thomas is putting it. We need to go somewhere. And I've just jumped out the shower and I'm like, I need to do a video. This is going to be a verdict episode. Orville and Star Trek Discovery. As you know, I am a Star Trek buff. I love the Star Trek universe. It thrills me to no end. I am a groupie on this front. I get slightly... Well, I'm not going to say that. I love the Star Trek episodes. I'll put it that way. So when I heard that a new one was coming out, I was on cloud nine. Holy shit, Star Trek Discovery is coming out. And then they say, well, wait a minute. It's not in the same Star Trek universe. What do you mean it's not in the same Trek universe? They still call themselves Star Trek Discovery. Spock has a sister. Okay. She so happens to be a human and she's African American. Okay. And the uniforms are different and Cleons are different, etc., etc. But okay, it's in a different universe. But it's still Star Trek, fair enough. Then I hear that the Orville has come out. Seth, I can't think of his last name, Seth. But the Orville is coming out. And I resisted watching the Orville because I felt like it's making fun of the Star Trek Enterprise. Meaning, it's Star Trek, but they're putting the jokes and everything else in, and I didn't necessarily want to deal with a sci-fi thing that was funny, if that makes sense. And this is a quirk. This is my own idiosyncrasy on this. I watched it. I fucking love it. I fucking love it. I fucking love it. So, the Orville is essentially Star Trek with jokes thrown in. That's all it is. Now, if we're having a contest and a conversation of what's more Star Trek, the Orville or Discovery, which seems to be the conversation that people have, then the answer has to be the Orville. It kills me to say it. The answer is the Orville. That show is fucking amazing. And I am honestly thinking about doing segments on episodes of the Orville. That's how good it is. It puts you into these moral quandaries to which there is no answer. This idea of this kind of relativistic point of view of things, which for the most part is true. If you want to inject your position into things, you're going to always end up in conflict. Now, in the Star Trek universe, they came up with this idea of the Prime Directive. We will not interfere with other nations because we don't want to get ourselves involved and embroiled in conflicts and everything else. And this is one of the main ideas of the Star Trek universe, this idea of we don't want to get involved. We're not going to apply our moral standards in our particular culture, in our particular society, to societies that evolved on other planets. Allow them to do the things that they do. Now, what digs into the audience on this are shows that deal with this thing of something atrocious is happening, but it's atrocious based on our standards. I would make the case that it's atrocious based on any standard that life is taken as a higher degree, but whatever. It's atrocious to us. And Picard, being Starfleet officer, would usually say, the Prime Directive precludes us from getting involved in this conflict. It kills you as a crew. You want to get involved. As a human being, you want to get involved. And you understand, though, that you can't apply your moral standard to another nation. Or in this case, another planet. The Orville hits at this, but it hits at this in a very interesting way because the Orville takes on many of the perspectives that we have right now. So... Oh, all right. I don't have a long time to go into this. But for example, one of the last episodes I watched was this thing on the Krill where the Krill was a bunch of religious fundamentalists. And in being a bunch of religious fundamentalists, they had this thing of we can take whatever we want from other countries or other nations or other planets. It doesn't matter if there's another species on that planet. Our religion tells us that they're not Krill, and because they're not Krill, they're not important, so we can kill and murder and slaughter and everything is good. And you're interacting with these people, and you're having this conversation with them, and they full well believe the things that they're saying. And you full well know that these people are full of it. And the entire episode is them subverting the God and the religion of that particular culture, without that culture knowing that they were doing so. But you end up with this quagmire where Seth is having this conversation at the very end with this woman who he blew up their ship. He killed everyone on their ship. Now mind you, everyone on that ship was about to kill 100,000 people on the planet. Purely. They're just farmland. And he's having this conversation when he's apologizing, saying, look, I'm sorry, we didn't have a choice, we did save the kids. And she's like, you understand that these kids are going to grow up hating humans and they're going to come back and murder you, right? You understand that you murdered everybody on the ship. They're going to come back and they're going to kill you. Now, it ends on that. There's no answer to that question. That's what makes it a fucking awesome question. Meaning, it's a moral dilemma. It's a dilemma that doesn't necessarily have an answer to it. You're engaging with a species that, for the most part, thinks that you're beneath them and that you can be killed based on their religious beliefs. Based on your beliefs, you believe that life, from this humanistic point of view, is important. And so the beliefs and the culture and the things that they have, you think is batshit crazy. But at the same token, you have to deal with them. How do you deal with them? Yes, you had to stop them from making, from killing all these people. But at the same token, that woman is right. All of these people are going to grow up hating your guts. What do? You didn't want to kill kids. That was against your conscience. Those kids are now going to grow up to come after you in starships that rival or even better than your own. What are you going to do? What's the answer to that question? And it leaves off because there is no answer. That was the best of Star Trek. That was the best of Star Trek. You can make an argument that the Orville is kind of rehashing Star Trek stories and everything else. It's fair enough. But it is hitting at the heart of what made Star Trek Star Trek. When you're talking about the original series of Next Generation, understand this idea of war is sexy. It's, the Federation has to put its morals up against the Klingon Empire in this war. But that wasn't what was the best of Star Trek. When the original series came on, that wasn't what was the best of Star Trek. When the Next Generation, again, that wasn't what was the best of Star Trek. These moral dilemmas, these moral quagmires, these things of putting your humanity up against what may take place in the rest of the universe, so other cultures that have evolved in a completely different way than you. That was the best of Star Trek. It didn't have answers. The only answer that Star Trek gave you was, we don't interfere. That was it. The Orville is slightly different on this because it doesn't seem like they have a prime directive in this strict sense of the way. But the Orville is just Star Trek. The people who work on the Orville were people who worked on Star Trek. So all of the elements for the most part are the same. The guy who had the baby, who had the sex change thing, he's just Worf. It's like, come on, it's just Star Trek. You're calling it the Orville. I'm surprised they haven't been sued. But if I'm giving my God's perspective opinion on this, the Orville beats the Discovery. It pummels it in regards to the quote-unquote Star Trekness, whatever that means. The Discovery is taken upon this thing of war is sexy, war is fun, we can put people in these dark scenarios, and this is what we're going to do for our show. And that's Discovery. But that's not the best elements of Star Trek. Yes, you can get moral quagmires in war, of course, it's war. But what about just people interacting with people without bad ends? And you still end up with these moral quagmires. I'm making this argument, I'm making the point that that was the best element of Star Trek. That is the element of Discovery that it misses. I understand you're creating a war with the Klingons, and so you're forcing quagmires, you're forcing morality issues. Fair enough. But the original series of Star Trek, that's not what it was. That's not what it was. If we're talking about Star Trekness, that's not what it was. Now, understand there was the Dominion War and everything else. Fair enough. I get it. That's true. But that Dominion War, put it this way, based upon the behavior of Star Trek itself, you can understand that pushing back into the cosmos, at some point it was going to reach into something that wasn't necessarily going to be on board with what it was doing. That's all I'm saying. The Dominion War was foreseeable. I don't think the Dominion War was crazy. I'm saying the entire pretext of Discovery goes against everything that's in Star Trek, even if you want to talk about the way the crew interacts with one another. All of the crews on Star Trek, for the most part, love each other. They're friends, they're family, all this other stuff. Discovery, they're at each other's throats. The Orville is the new Star Trek. I proclaim the Star Trek series dead. It's not that I hate Discovery, don't get me wrong. It's just when you're looking between the two, what retains the most of what the original creator wanted? And you have to come to this kind of conclusion that it was the Orville. Discovery is jazzed up to be sexy and forced and everything else. The Orville is just the Orville. It's just Star Trek. It's a fanboy's dream of what he wanted Star Trek to be. That's what you got. Somebody who likes comedy, so they added in comedy, but ultimately it's Star Trek. Alright, it's 1:02. I don't want my wife to leave me, so I'm going to leave right now. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support the Patreon. Thanks, guys.